Okay, I said yay out loud, which did not happen because I was double muted, but we're good.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the DEI topic focus panel on the trans spectrum and the SCA. I'm very excited about this panel, and I really want to thank all of our panelists for being here, and thank you for being here. My name is Olivia. I'm a deputy of the corporate DEI office, and I have a few disclaimers before we get started, and then we're going to get into everything that we want to talk about. And so I want to read my disclaimer to you. None of us are representing SCA or SCA proper, even though this is an official SCA event. We are members of the known world that have stepped forward to engage in a roundtable discussion. It's our hope that this forum will aid in further conversations to assist in developing a positive culture with diversity, equity, and inclusion in various local groups, kingdoms, and the society as a whole. The views and opinions expressed by the panel and interview participants are their current opinions and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of SCA Incorporated. And no one on the panel has been asked to or is being assumed to represent any community at large. They are speaking to their personal experiences and opinions. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because all of those things are very important. Again, my name is Olivia. I'm from Atlantia, and this is not about me. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. And let me just go ahead and let them get that started.
Hi, I'm Lord Skallagrim Ulfhedinn from Caid. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I am a fighter and a bard. I also do armor crafting, leather work. I am non-binary and transmasculine. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Hello, I am Maestra Rosa. I'm a second gen Skadian. I have been in the SCA since I was 5, so 30 years now. Just came out this year as a trans woman. I'm super excited to be here and represent this community that I am now a part of. And I do a lot of rapier, dabble in heavy, do lots of arts and crafts, and super excited to be here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Margrét Junc. I come from Ealdormere. I use they and them pronouns, although my persona, Margrét Junc, will be referred to by she, her, which is a little bit of a complication, which I'll get into a little bit later. I bard, and I have a lot of interest in doing DEI work and policy, procedure, events planning. Those are all the things I'd love to get into. I am actually one of the news. So I joined right before the plague hit, got into my first event, and that's about it.
And I am next. I am Count Yseult de Michel from the Kingdom of Calontir. I have been in the SCA for only 6 years now, but I've enjoyed it the entire time, have lived in 3 different kingdoms, including Lockhack, the West, and Calontir. Our reign with Duke Anton and I was last year and ended in January of this year. And I'm just really glad to be here and to be able to spread so much information and help people understand where we're at within the SCA and trans issues.
I am Tvorimir Danilov. I am from the Kingdom of Calontir. I am intersex. I have been in since AS 22, so that's 1988. I am part of the Pelican Voivode. and a marshal, a herald, a doer of all kinds of random things, and lead our Kayurgins Guild. I am intersex and, for some definitions of trans. We'll get into that later too.
I'm Laelia Sulpiciana in the society, and my persona is a she, her. In early Roman Imperial Flavian dynasty, in particular, Atlantis and Herculaneum regions. I specialize in deep research, which is one of the ways my neurodivergence expresses itself in SCA. I will talk your face off about anything, and I'm happy to receive the same. In mundane life, I use they, them pronouns. I'm non-binary. I'm also ace. And a lot of my awareness of those things and the safety of coming out in those ways, both within the society and in mundane life, is grounded in how my fellow Skadians have made space for my expression of myself. And it's been a real pleasure seeing this group and these panels come together over recent times. So I've been around the SCA since like 1995, 97, something like that. So my first like 6 or 7 events were Penzic, like you do. And as far as my active local, meaning kingdom level stuff, has been in Atlantia in a few states. So in Virginia and Maryland and Northern Atlantia. And now I live in North Carolina in the Barony of Windmaster's Hill. And post-pandemic, I'm hoping to get to know the folks here a little bit better, but happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for that introduction. Hang on just a second. I think I'm having. Thank you, everyone, for that. We're going to get into our questions that were pre-submitted. Just as a reminder for those watching, we have moderators keeping an eye on the comments. So please keep your questions coming, and we'll keep an eye on those, and we will answer those after we get through our pre-submitted questions. So let's get into some definitions, because I think it's hard to have a conversation around the trans spectrum without defining some terms first. What does it mean to be transgender? What is the trans spectrum? What's the trans umbrella? And what does intersex have to do with that?
I believe that I am the first one speaking on this. So to kind of cover some of the basic umbrella terms, transgender, one of the accepted definitions is somewhat is denoting or relating to a person whose sense of personal identity and gender don't correspond with their birth sex. This is not all-encompassing. If someone wants to not identify as transgender, even if they do fit this definition, that is completely up to the individual. Then we have some other terms like trans spectrum, trans umbrella. These things are really denoting the fact that transgender doesn't just fit within the binary. So a lot of people think, when they first think a transgender person, they think someone who's a trans male or trans female, but we have an entire spectrum of identities that fall underneath that, including non-binary, which is where I identify, agender, which is typically someone who doesn't identify with any gender, and more beyond that. And the trans spectrum exists not just with like how you're presenting. It's not just how you're presenting. So a lot of people will make the mistake of thinking, oh, this person's a trans male because they look male. But there are you can look however you want. You can identify however you are, whoever you are, as far as your identity, and all of these things go along with sign, sex of birth, and how you are presenting yourself. But I think that Mir is the one who wants to speak on intersex identities.
And what a lovely transition. Assigned sex at birth. That's not as straightforward as we are often led to believe. So when an infant comes out, the doctor looks at genital presentation at that time and makes a call. For the vast majority of the population, that call, based on their understanding of what they're looking at, is really straightforward. For some of us, it is not straightforward. So we have these terms assigned female at birth, AFAB, or assigned male at birth, AMAB. You will also, from the intersex community, hear coercively assigned female at birth, coercively assigned male at birth. I was modified at birth. I have scar tissue because I did not fit either. And let's just say it's a little easier to reduce than to expand. So when we talk about the intersex community, we are not talking about a gender identity. We're talking about a series of diagnoses that are considered differences of sex development. You will find us in books sometimes as disorders of sex development. Most of us reject that fairly strongly. We may be up to 1.7% of the population. Those numbers are really fuzzy, but consider us about as frequent as original redheads. With that, you then have intersex people who choose to do further modification to go one direction or another, as I did. And you have people who consider themselves cis with a genetic disorder. You have people who consider themselves trans or non-binary, grabbing some of these terms that this greater community has to help us understand ourselves.
Thank you for those definitions. The next question, what is a dead name? If I use someone's dead name or their former pronouns by accident in conversation, what do I do?
All right, so a dead name is simply a name that someone used to go by, but no longer does, and sometimes they can be very dysphoric. It's usually their birth name, but it can also be a nickname maybe that they had in a childhood that they feel doesn't really work with their identified gender. When you dead name somebody or you accidentally use the wrong pronouns, the best way to do it is just to correct yourself. So if you go, oh, I heard he, and they go, wait, I mean, I heard they. When I accidentally use the wrong pronouns, because even trans folks do it, I always repeat the entire sentence because that drills it into my head and makes it less likely that I'm going to repeat the mistake.
And Skallagrim used a word there, dysphoric. So we're used to the word euphoria, that joy in things. Dysphoria and feeling dysphoric is a term that we use for particularly gender dysphoria and in our little community subculture, to talk about those things that are cognitive dissonance, where suddenly we are faced with something that counters the gender we understand ourselves to be. So when I had breasts, I felt dysphoric about having a chest that did not match my understanding of myself. That's the only thing I need to add to Skallagrim there. Awesome.
Thank you. While we're on the topic of pronouns, why are pronouns so important? When a cisgender person responds to the question, what are your pronouns, with the response any or all, what are your feelings on this?
I had it unmuted. So I've been doing this personally in mundane life right now, that pronouns are super important and going off of what Mira said, it can trigger a lot of dysphoria and depression in people. Pronouns are super important in our community because we've lived, depending on when we caught our dysphoria, will depend on how long we've been able to do that pronoun. So usually we can do like she, her, he, him, they, them. Some have done she, them, he, them. It's definitely different pronouns. Asking us is very nice when you can be like, hey, I'm not sure what is your pronouns, because I could look very femme, but still want to be they, them, or opposite with the masculine. Like non-binary people are very, we all like our pronouns, and they're super important because we're trying to represent a certain gender that we feel like immensely we want to be. When someone asks me the question, I'm pretty open. Most of us are actually pretty open and really, really appreciate when you ask what our preferred pronouns, especially when I first started coming out. A lot of people are like, where do you want to be? Are you full time yet? And I went pretty quickly than some people out there. Any all is fine. It's a pretty gender neutral. The more gender neutral you can stay, if you're not quite sure, the better, but always asking is very nice.
Yep. And to kind of expand on that, asking is super important and super nice, and really gives that affirming that affirming feel, no matter where we're at with different parts of dysphoria, because dysphoria comes in all different kinds of flavor: body dysphoria, voice dysphoria, and more. And so, having those affirming things in your life, like people not calling you your dead name, people using your pronouns, they really do add on to this being able to solidify this sense of self, and feeling like people are respecting what your sense of self is and who you are. As far as when cisgender people, and that the other half of this question is when a cisgender person responds to what are your pronouns with any or all, there's I could see some people being upset about that, because saying that can be, what is the reason for that cisgender person saying, oh, you can refer to me as any pronouns or all pronouns? Is it that they're exploring themselves? So obviously you don't want to just be upset about that kind of thing. Or are they trying to provide support? Obviously I'm not everyone within the trans community, but for me, it does feel important that, if a person has pronouns that they care about, that they use those, because using he, him, if that's not how you feel, it doesn't necessarily provide support, in my opinion. But what, saying that yours are she, her, or they, them, or whatever, it shows that there's an importance behind what those words are, versus just saying, oh, they don't matter. But again, for some people, they don't matter, and that's okay too. So that is my answer.
That was really helpful. Thank you. So being raised to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir, what's the best way to break that habit slowly? How does one treat one with respect without assuming gender?
So Ealdormere again. And in the SCA, we have some lovely terms that we can use. For decades now, my heraldic pattern is my lords, my ladies, good gentles all. Good gentles. Kind beings. Noble kin. There are lots of things that we can do in sort of the flowery speech that we use in the SCA that welcome everyone in and don't leave you in a position of having guessed and guessed wrong.
It was mundanely, yes, ma'am, and no, sir, has been hard for me because I deal with people on the phone a lot. We do have a society built off of Lord, Lady, Maestra, Master. We've had this huge discussion with the Master of Defense, um, trying to gender neutralize our own titles as it is. We've done um, to break the habit, just saying like thank you or I appreciate your help, or trying to, if you can leave pronouns out, it helps a lot because it's hard because it's again, it's all back down to dysphoria and just assuming someone's gender. If they look cis and they're, you call them she, her, or they might be fine with it, but a lot of us with our dysphoria, it depends on the level of dysphoria we have. But yeah, breaking a habit, try doing more gender neutral terms like thank you, or I appreciate your help, or that was very kind of you. You know, they helped us out a lot. I mean, you could use it plural or singular. So trying to find different ways than yes, ma'am, and no, sir helps you not assume one's gender, and definitely helps respect everyone in the room without knowing yes or no if they have a certain gender or not.
So let's change the topic a little bit and talk about the gender spectrum. I've heard it said that the trans spectrum is a spectrum and it's not just A to B or B to A. Can the panel elaborate on that a little bit and tell me more and the society more about what that means?
Yeah, I will start on this question. So I kind of alluded to it before about how gender presentation, as well as how the way that your body is, what sex you were born or assigned at birth, all of these things really come into who you are and where you kind of fall within your own transgender spectrum. Personally for me, how I kind of fall is I'm AFAB. I was born female, assigned that at birth, and I don't identify as a female. I don't identify as a male, but I kind of identify as this middle spectrum, not androgynous. But there's so many places within there that people can end up falling, and all different kinds of pronouns, all different kinds of ways that they either do or don't make changes with their body. Like that is part of the trans spectrum as well. Do people choose medical interventions? Do they not? How do they, one person might feel body dysphoria and one other person might not. Body dysphoria isn't a requirement for being transgender. And really people can also, that there are people on the trans spectrum who change, who move from being, today I woke up and I'm feeling he, him pronouns and this is how I want to present, and the next day could feel different. And really it just depends on that person and who they are, and just getting to know them and where they fall and how they feel. So that's my take on the trans spectrum.
And to add to that, which I do like the big thing with the trans spectrum about how we physically change is like, I like being very femme. I like the makeup. I like dressing in skirts and stuff. I have a lot of women that I've been friends with for years that are like, you are more girly than I am now. And a lot of us, but then there's a lot of us that it's not the clothes that make us dysphoric, but it might be our look. So we will, like Yseult said, do more of the surgeries and stuff. Or some of us just want to be he, them, she, her, and still wear the same clothes. We just want to feel masculine or feminine by pronouns. I personally wanted to do everything. I still have to wait a year. A lot of us are, I'm on, we call it HRT, or hormone replacement therapy, where we try to replace what we were born with and try to add it to switches. Right now, I'm on 7 months of switching, a lot of doctor consulting. But it was a choice of mine. I could have chose not to do anything for a couple of years, or I could have chose to do everything and line up. There's no, and also on the spectrum, there's no right way on speed or time that you do things. It's all on your own time. We have a decent sized community in each that we try to be like, you do you, you be happy. What makes you happy? And that's what we really, that's why it's such a spectrum, because some of us go super math, super femme, and some of us just still stay kind of gender neutral. And that's how I've seen the trans spectrum.
Well, for me personally, I mean, the spectrum has been really important for me. The first time I kind of came out to one friend and I said, maybe I'm trans male, because I'd never heard of non-binary or agender or any of these other terms, but after, just a few weeks of them calling me he, him and treating me like a guy, I realized that that's really not me. Like, I thought maybe, and I was like, well, maybe I'm just, a tomboy. Well, later I came across, the non-binary terms, and it was like something clicked. It was just, oh, that's who I am, and so really for us, and after that point, it was just a narrowing down of terms, started out with, oh, I'm non-binary, and I think I'm agender, maybe I'm agender flux, so it's really about finding your words. At least it has been from my experience, and I'm not a different person that I was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, before I knew these words. I just have a better way of describing myself and saying who I
am. So along the same lines of the gender spectrum and pronouns, how can they be used to describe one person as an individual? Is that grammatically correct? Is it acceptable to expect to be referred to with non-binary terms, even though those terms aren't historically accurate?
So I'm happy to respond to this, in part because I'm a linguistic nerd. The short answer is yes, it's absolutely appropriate grammatically. In English and any of the other Romance languages also tend to have a neutral term or a collective term to be used that would be the analog to they, them in English. I'd be happy to ping people exhaustive, ridiculous, Oxford Dictionary level of detail as to all of the instances of it being used as a singular pronoun. It dates back even into period for us. I know there's instances where Chaucer was using it in Canterbury Tales and other correspondence, as well as Shakespeare. So it is both period for us, and it's also very kind. I have encountered some folks who were kind of resistant to the idea of it and wanted to be that, like, it's this way, not that way. And I'm like, you are talking about the English language again, right? Like, you do realize we literally mug other languages for their grammar, So that's one of the other things that's wonderful about our using English as a primary language in our society, is it does have that flexibility. It does have that history of not having, for example, l'Académie Française telling us truly, like, no, this is the right grammar. And there's practices in modern English that have been around since the 1970s in publishing that are slightly different from the they, them choice, which is the one I made, to be honest with you, largely for the comfort of other people who are most likely to be able to remember that, as opposed to some of the other pronouns, like the SPVAC pronouns I really like, where effectively the the gender notifiers are dropped. So, you know, it would be an EY and EM and E, those types of things. So I think my personal pronoun journey is going to be continuing to evolve. And I've given folks, you know, use the royal we if you need to, you know, kind of like where we taught on PBS shows back in the day. You know, imagine I have a mouse in my pocket, whatever you need to do. It's my mundane self and my persona together, you know, just giving folks mnemonics that they can use to, it's really to soothe the person who's learning how to do this, right? And like, I feel if I make it easier for them, they are much more likely to remember how to do it and feel comfortable when they encounter someone else who has different pronouns. That's kind of my idea.
So this particular question is on my list of questions that is pretty exhausting, and I will be answering it as well. It's exhausting because it gets really exhausting having to always navigate around people and negotiate. How do I deal with this person who doesn't understand me? So I have to navigate their delicate feelings without making them really upset. And so answering this question over and over and over again is taxing. Here's one of the things that that everyone who's non-trans is able to do. This is something that is a basic respect thing, the same way that glasses, they're not period for everyone, / we don't really have, not everyone has glasses that are period appropriate or stylistically, because that's something expensive. It's something that we just accept as part of the culture because it's a necessary. If you don't have glasses for a lot of people, then there's going to be a lot of people bumbling around and not able to communicate. And just rereading the question to get my brain readjusted into what it was actually about. Also, additionally, this is not something that's applicable in all languages. Like, I'm half Chinese, and everyone is 他喜欢吃肉，他喜欢吃菜，他喜欢喝酒。You don't know who I'm referring to, because everyone is referred to by the exact same pronoun. So it's something that is natural and normal across all of our different languages to have different kinds of pronouns, and they should be all acceptable. It is basic respect and dignity to refer to people by whatever words that they want to be referred to by. And it's times like this that we are doing this work for you, not for pay. If I had, for the number of times I've been asked these sorts of questions, and it's exhausting, it's taxing, and I rarely get paid to do this, or paid much. There was a time in my life when I was making $50 per workshop, and that was not very nice. That wasn't fun, because I put in all this work and get paid $50. So there is an actual monetary value attached to our labor.
I have nothing to add to the excellent linguistics lesson, except that when we go formal or don't know, they're going to be sorry they parked in my spot. We do use it, and it is disingenuous to claim otherwise.
So that was a really great conversation about that question, and I really appreciate everyone that took the time to submit these, because I'm reading them verbatim, and I want to thank everybody for taking the time to explain that, because it was great. Mir, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear your perspective if you're willing to talk about the trans spectrum not being a spectrum and A to B and B to A, because I want to hear your voice on this, if you don't mind sharing with us, please.
Thank you. So when I was young, the understanding of trans did not include any middle ground. When I came out in college, if you were not going to get bottom surgery, you weren't really trans. There was this understanding, and I'm talking about late 80s, early 90s, I cannot speak before that, that you were going from entirely box A to entirely box B, or you had to pretend to be legitimated. Things have greatly changed since then. I had a friend in that college queer group and that was a time when queer was a very challenging word too, by the way, who referred to their gender as gender bleep. And what they wore each day was to gender bleep, because there was not a word to express their experience. And I strongly believe that this individual now is probably delighted to refer to themselves as one of the non-binary or agender identities. Because of those lines, I never saw myself as trans, because I didn't start in box A. I started a muddled mess of biology in between, and really didn't want to be in between because it's really not a pleasant place to be. And I had these things out front, so I was stuck in A, because it's easier to shave the beard than it is to shave your chest until you get enough money to do it surgically. I really like growing my beard, by the way. I am very happy now to be able to have a zone where the people who need boxes can see me, because it's a safety thing. We're going to get later to how we can help each other and support each other, and it comes down to being a safe place and making a safe place. So one can be trans. There are people whose expressions are what I would have called a bull dyke 40 years ago, who are transmasculine. There are people that folks older than I would have called Nelly or Light in the Loafers, who are trans feminine, a bit, however they express it. And we are learning that there is such a depth to gender expression, even within the cis, if you really look at it. And so it is important for us to make space for us to take whatever space we need to live in, whether it's here or here or here or here, or maybe up here. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for sharing that. So, do you have any favorite resources for helping non-binary individuals find non-gendered names and titles that might suit them? Do you have any recommendations for creating a more androgynous or neutral persona?
Okay. The short answer is it depends, which is also showing my being a consultant in saying that. If I were to have someone contact me, which you're all welcome to do, and say, I'm interested in having a persona in this time and place, in this culture, etc., I would probably, work with them to contact book heralds and, linguists in that space and that culture, and really try to nerd around and figure something out. The short answer is, for a lot of European cultures, particularly anything that would be considered in the Christian era, you're going to have a really hard time finding anything that would be an honorific that would also recognize anything that isn't in the gender binary. So I think some of the stuff we're doing in the SCA right now by abstracting out to honorifics like noble, which like when I heard that, I'm like, ooh, I have a title now, is pretty awesome. But like my coming out at all as non-binary, and I think Mira and I are probably of like age, there was not a space for that. So the A and B thing was very much what I have been in and did not consider myself trans. And I still am kind of like, oh yeah, I guess like by definition, linguistically I am, because I'm not binary, you know? So I'm still looking into this space and would really welcome, you know, if there's someone that had a very specific desire for that. For me personally, my name registration reflects my primary area of research interest and recreation of clothing and material finds. I have a secondary interest, kind of my minor, if you will, that's about 7 centuries later, and that one is more reflected in the clothing that I'm wearing right now. That would be a time when, you know, I would probably encourage other people to use a they them pronoun or a he him even in the society. So I'm one of those people that's kind of floating around in the middle. There was a cartoon I saw not terribly long ago that had a person that was speaking, I think it was a Shen comic maybe, of like, I don't really care about, you know, what pronouns are used for me, which is pretty much me. And then someone saying, oh yeah, pronouns totally don't matter. I'm like, they really, really do. But for me personally, in the society context, I'm kind of playing with dolls, if you will, where I'm like, this is my Laelia Sulpiciana, and she is a patrician class, you know, matrona, so she wears all of the makeup and all of the jewelry and all of the silks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have yet to define a persona for my Gotlander, but I'm probably going to go with a male grapevine because they have better knives, you know, something like that. So my non-binary experience in society might not line up with what someone else might want. And I think this is going to be one of those places where we collectively, you know, come up with modalities that will allow for that. I've been seeing some things happen in modern Spanish, for example, that using an E rather than an A or an O to end terms would be a way of, you know, kind of being more inclusive, more expressive. So yeah, I think the resources are out there. I just don't know that we have them collated as well as we do for other bits of research in society. But like that's definitely going to be one of the things once I get a little bit more settled in my research. I already know the answers for Rome. You really did not want to be one of us in my time period for my primary persona. But there are very likely later or other cultures that did not have that, the Roman reaction, let's just call it that. And I'm going to be jazzed when someone comes up with a bit of research that demonstrates that, because I will have my next rabbit hole to dive into, because I think that's going to be really affirming, you know, particularly for those of us that are kind of exploring the space and figuring it out. I think that'll be very helpful.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing. Count.
Yeah. So here there are some resources out here. As far as the first part of the question, which is around helping non-binary individuals find non-gendered names and titles and things that might suit them. Again, yeah, get connected with, you know, a herald who's in your area. It depends on the culture, but a lot of cultures, have really strong, you know, this is a male name, this is a female name. But often, just like in English, there are crossover names where you may have used this, you know, no matter what gender you were. And so it helps to have a herald around to help find what those things are. There are, obviously we have rules within in the College of Heralds, but within those, there are things that can move around and things that can, you know, go there. And the College of Heralds, at least, you know, from what I've been told and what I've experienced, is getting better about, trying to help people who are not, just cis male, female, find names and titles. There's actually a really good website that they have out of list of alternative titles. It doesn't have a ton of information on it as far as gender neutral titles. There are some, but one way that people here can be listening and helping, like, listen to this and help us, is go through and try and do some of this research, try and find some of these gender neutral titles, submit the research so that we can get it added to this list so it is easier for people to access. And then as far as, let me get back to my list. As far as the second part of the question, recommendations about creating more androgynous or neutral persona, I know that there's this spectrum of, oh, I feel like I can't have a neutral persona, so I have to choose one side or the other in order to stay historically accurate. And then there's this idea of you can mix styles. You can mix, if someone who is traditionally male would wear, this kind of outfit up to their knees, but someone who's traditionally female would wear it to, their ankles. Figure out something that works for you as far as what you're comfortable with. And I recommend, yes, choose period styles, try and choose them from the same period. And oftentimes the outfit will still come together very, very well because you're still mixing from the same period, the same kind of styles. So that is my biggest recommendation.
Thank you. I do want to note that in the same way we've had a resource list for other panels, we will have a resource list for this panel, and we are going to include the link to titles in the SCA that has the gender neutral titles. So that'll be something you can access. So our next question that was submitted: as a non-binary trans man who just joined the SCA recently, I worry about backlash or misgendering as my presentation is fairly fluid. After all, who doesn't like a nice dress? What has the general attitude in your experience playing while trans been with this?
So I'm the one who wants to answer this question. I'm also a new, so keep in mind that I don't have the years of experience that everyone else has, but I can speak to more generally as someone who is trans and does trans educational work for a living sometimes. One of the things, this is something for all the non-trans people. There is, once again, we have to be very careful and mindful how we navigate around all of you. We have to be very, very careful. Like when I'm very fortunate to have a partner who is in the SCA and has been in the SCA for a very, very, very long time. And so I've been introduced to, these are the good people, talk to these people, don't talk to those people over there, stay away. So this is where I've been very, very fortunate to be introduced to the people who are good people to rely on and such. One of my personal worries is traveling to the US. As someone who is trans feminine, I face sexual harassment crossing the border. It is, I don't know, it's a luck of the draw to see if I will be sexually harassed crossing the border. If I present as anything other than a woman, and it has to be immaculate, then there is a good chance that I may be sexually harassed. And so there's some things I don't want to, I have to be very, very mindful of, because if you look at who ends up getting murdered, it's primarily trans women who are racialized, who are probably also involved with sex work, but still it's largely trans women. And so when it comes to, when it comes to all these issues of navigating these things, here's my suggestion for all the cis people in the audience. Yep, is to be accepting of all the different ways that people can present themselves and refer to their pronouns appropriately, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for this particular person, find good people. Find people who are good allies. Find your community, and you can build up from there.
So I was originally slated to talk on this subject, but hearing them speak, I thought of, I think I've been very lucky, partially in that I live in California and we're, super liberal. So I don't have to worry as much, and also being trans masculine, I have less worries than being trans feminine. But I mean, really, I've never had overt, like transphobia, people trying to, beat me up or anything. It's always been small things like, I'm not going to call you by your pronouns, or, yeah, that's nice that you're trans, but I'm not going to respect that. So depending on where you play, it's, touch and feel, touch and go, and like they said, find your people. You'll find people who respect you and who are cool with that. And yeah, and if you're in California, give me a shout out. I'll be your friend.
Thank you for sharing. Those responses were very powerful, and I hope that they remind the allies watching why it's so important to be safe, a safe space, and inclusive and welcoming, and listen to the voices on the panel, because what they're saying really matters. Okay. What's the best way to discuss clothing during the SCA time period? Is femme versus mask attire best, or is female versus male clothing okay too? I don't want to alienate anyone when I give classes on clothing and costuming. I think that anyone can wear anything they wish, but our understanding of language around gender and historical perspectives, I don't always align neatly.
So I think this is an excellent question. For me, as someone who tries to present masculine, I really want to know, were these clothes worn by men or women historically? I have a Viking persona, and maybe with Loki there's a little bit of gender neutral or gender flexibility, but in general, it was either male clothing or female clothing. You don't see a lot of crossover. So, I want to know. I think the best way is just to say historically, these were male clothes, but of course in the SCA, we are, the Middle Ages as they were supposed to be. And so therefore you can wear them no matter your gender. I think that would be a great way to just put into your classes and stuff to make everybody feel comfortable, but also give everybody knowledge of how it was historically used.
I think I'm all for calling clothing what it is. This is a dress. This is here are some boots. And being able to then be able to talk about, and these are things that a lot of men wore. Here are some things that some women wore. So the emphasis is more on this is what it is, and you can call it whatever you want to really call it. That's my personal preference, because it gives people people who want to be more androgynous, whatever they or okay, I'm not wording properly. As someone who is trans feminine, there are times when one of my fantasies is barding on a particular event, I don't know which one, dressed up as a more male persona, and just to mess up everyone's perceptions of my persona, but it's still my persona as someone else. And so this is not, I would not be wearing men's clothes. These are my clothes, but these are clothes that are traditionally worn by men.
So to add on to that, I think a lot of this will evolve as we get more into it with the clothing, discussing whether it's femme or mask. In the mundane community, we definitely say more femme or more masculine, gender neutral. So looking at SCA clothing when it was very binary on females typically wore this, males typically wore that, I don't think anyone playing the hobby is really going to, I think that there's a lot more understanding since we're all learning. I'm even trying to teach a class on like how the queer society grew from BC to 1600s. So there's still a lot that I'm learning even historically. So I would say for now, it's totally, until we evolve or we have more people that have concern, classes and clothing is very genderized. I mean, unless you look at like Joan of Arc, she was purposely burned for wearing men's clothes, cross-dressing. They had very gendered type of clothing. I like saying feminine mask when it comes to things. I will probably adopt it that way just because that's how I am learning in my culture now. But I still think it's a preference. It's just how we taught, and it's just what the history is. So to me, female or male clothing kind of also helps for persons that want to go very femme or very masculine. And I've tried to make an Italian female peasant dress. It has it in the name because that's how the research came along. But that's all I had to add.
Yeah, I'm appreciating everything that folks have said. And Mir, if I just saw a message go across that you wanted to contribute to this thread as well, I'm down with that plan. I think, Margaret, I really, really, really like what you said about, speaking to the object in question and then its use, right? So I'm, as I mentioned, a big research nerd and a big clothier nerd. And in my time frame, in particular, you'll see that all of the garments until the very last thing people put on were absolutely the same. Didn't matter who you are. Like if you had clothing, you wore it like this, right? From skin out, with the exception of depending on, breast mass size, whether or not you wanted to wear a mamillary. And in my years of teaching that, and in particular in Atlantia, running up to coronation for Velharic and Ariel, I traveled around and met with a lot of people who had a lot of different body shapes and different heights and, everything about it. So the way that I teach my clothing construction is more about, here's the sources, here's what they look like, here's what we found, outside of Roman, there's not many grave finds or anything, but if I have a grave find, I'll reference like, here are the bones that were found with it, any context I can provide, and then the modifications for that individual's body structure and how they want it to look when they're wearing it, right? I think that's where a lot of what we do in the SCA, we have much more latitude to adjust our language to be, here's my sources, it's presenting this way, it's an allegorical figure, so you probably wouldn't do X, Y, and Z, like there's a lot of saints that I love for doing that stuff because like Rosa mentioned, where you see Jeanne d'Arc, it was very, very impactful to the people of that time period to see her presented as what they would have seen, you know, as a knight, a warrior for Christ, because that's what like the Crusaders at all were looking like. So there's a lot we can unpack in that. And at the end of the day, it really is like, this is your outer draped layer. And if you wanted to look like you were a male citizen, it would look like this. And if you want to be understood as being a female Matrona citizen, you would make it look like that, you know. So I think the SCA is really going to open up a lot of really interesting pockets in clothing reconstruction in particular, because we have such latitude to, but that some of the more restrictive reenactment style things, you know, we just have more available to us. So I will stop at that. And again, happy to geek out about this stuff. And thank you, Margaret. I really liked your language for that.
Yeah, and I also wanted to jump in on this question, mostly around exactly like what specific language I personally use or give to people. Before I super dive into that, I do want to kind of mention, you know, based on one of the things that was just said about grave finds. Like if you find a grave, if there's a found grave, often they'll say, oh, this was, you know, this was someone who was female, this is someone who's male. Oftentimes we can't always specifically tell, depending on bone structures and things like that. They have gotten it wrong before. And so it's always good to say, you know, this was found with other feminine, traditionally feminine items, and kind of leave it at that, because then it can be left for the interpretation that it actually should be left for. But the specific language that I do use, and I suggest people use when they're asking, oh, you know, do I say male clothing? Do I say female clothing? I say, you know, traditionally feminine attire, traditionally masculine attire. Unless there was like, you know, oh, this was actually traditionally supposed to be neutral. No matter what gender you are, you would wear it. And so that makes it easier, though going back and explaining it is this item of clothing, people who were traditionally feminine wore it, is also really important in order to understand that history. So thank you all for bringing that up.
One of the things that's kind of fascinating, there's an indication that I actually based my original persona on, that in Novgorod, in the city of Novgorod, there was a merchant family in the oligarchy that didn't have a male heir and dressed up what was probably a female and passed that child as male to continue the seat on council and all the status things. And one of the fascinating things about this and about some of our grave finds is that the eye of the time was less expecting somebody to be a gender transgressor, less expecting somebody to try to pass as that other gender. And it means that by wearing those clothes, you were giving those cues. And we will never know how many people successfully passed their lives as who they truly were, regardless of what they had under their belt.
That was a lot of great information. Thank you so much. So let's transition into some harder questions. What questions are okay to ask someone on the trans spectrum, and which ones are inappropriate?
So this is where I add a little bit of humor in. When this question comes up, there's always the joke of, sorry, I was watching our chat here. There's always the joke of, oh, what's an inappropriate question? Wouldn't you like to know? Okay, that didn't quite work out. there's usually, people always want to ask us about our genitals. And so the response is, of course, to answer, wouldn't you like to know? It's humorous, but the point of it is to, it's a way to talk back at questions that we don't think are appropriate. And so think about how you would ask anyone else. Would you go up to your grandmother and ask, what are your genitals? Can I see your genitals? You would not do that. But to ask something like, oh, and another pet peeve of mine was, when are you going to get the surgery? Or other such questions that are very, 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 very personal. Or the assumption, or people assuming how I'm going to transition. So when I was 18 as a gender question mark youngling who was identifying as genderqueer, all the trans women elders were not like me. They all wore really, really nude colored lipstick. They were all trying to pass for cis, which is understandable. But I also, that was not me. And so I spent like 6 years in limbo of, what am I? I am a blob. And it basically took me reading the book, The Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano for it to finally hit in for me to understand, this is me, this is how I want to identify. That was the crux, and I'm tangenting onto other things. Inappropriate questions. It all really, really depends on how well you know someone. If this is someone who you just met, asking them about their transition things, no, unless they volunteer to do it first, you don't do that. It is not good policy. Things you could ask is like, that's a nice suit you're wearing. That's a nice tunic. I really like your jewelry. These are all things, yep. These are all things that are appropriate and also engage people in conversation, and it's positive. Think up, boost people up. Don't really try to push them down. And introducing yourself. That's another fun way. Being like, hello, I'm blank, and these are my pronouns. Who are you? Anyways, that's just my little intro of the hard questions.
To go off of that, just don't ask when we're going to have the surgery. Some of us never do. That is a huge pet peeve in the trans community entirely. Some of us just do, and it's back on the trans spectrum. Some of us just do hormones and that's it. Some of us don't. Don't ask us our dead names. Even in the SCA now, I have two dead names. Very weird. Never thought I would do that, but I could have stayed Martin all by myself and just played that persona, but I want to go so femme that Martin's now a dead name. I mean, even officially now it's released to the public. I am now Rosa Marcella. Super excited. Just happened a couple days ago while I was on vacation. So I'm super happy my name's official. Dead names are horribly, it's a huge dysphoria for a lot of people. I personally talk about it openly. I have a blog. I'm trying to do it as like an educational thing, but it's a lot easier not to ask the question and just talk to a person like they have been that their entire life. Like my doctor telling me I've had GED since 5th grade is really weird to think about, but it made me understand my life a lot better. Some of us never figure it out. Some of us don't have it. And GD, by the way, gender dysphoria, we just call it GD. I didn't know if we described that earlier. So dead names, surgeries, are we going to do hormones? Sometimes how's vocal training going is fine, but usually I'm a lot more open about things than other people tend to be, because a lot of us, as another term, want to pass. If we're going super femme or super mask, or we're in a dangerous environment, we try to pass. And so we don't want to be asked these questions around people. If you know us personally, do it on the side. But even then, it's really hard to know what are proper and improper questions to each individual person. Each of our journeys are different. I have not gotten annoyed with the question because we've been on lockdown since I've been out as trans. So I haven't gotten all these type of questions. But in general, surgeries, hormones, and bed names are big no-no questions no matter who you ask.
Thank you all for your responses. And like one of the things that, this will be the first time I'm saying it out loud, that's really been evolving for me as I get more and more understanding of my present tense, you know, kind of looking back and revisiting upbringing, like, oh, neurodivergence. Yeah, that would have been good to know like 35, 45 years ago. We'll just say 50, that'll be fine. But there's also that part of, you know, I was doing that like, oh, I'm, you know, Gen X 80s kid. We all wore lipstick. We all wore jeans. We all wore boots, you know. So there's been lots of things, just the timing of my upbringing that I was kind of ignoring the fact that I don't really like to wear skirts and dresses and stuff and, you know, only wear pantsuits. And I find it very amusing when someone serves me at a store because I'm like, well, that is the patriarchy. So at least you're acknowledging that I have some power and dominance here, you know? So there's stuff that happened for me medically though. And that's where I think tying into what Rosa was just saying, if it's a medical question, you better be really close to me or be my doctor or be my healthcare power of attorney, unless I'm offering that information, which I will do right now. So unrelated to any of my gender awareness, in 2015, I decided to get a significant breast mass reduction. Like it was like, I think I lost 4 pounds and 8 or 9 inches in diameter in one morning. And had I known then what I know now, I probably would have just gone ahead and had a complete, you know, removal or gone smaller than the size that we ended in. I'm happy with it now, but that was a big shift. That I think for me was a key point in my experience. One of which was I got a lot more eye contact, which was kind of funny and also horrifying at the same time. But it was a shift in how people were relating to me. So I know, Margaret, you're laughing because like, hi. And I also got different gender addressed to me much more often, not just because of my short hair. So for me, I'm like really enjoying the fact that I have medical provision right now that I'm in North Carolina, that will ask me those questions and say, hey, if you want to, we have this gender institute over here who will help you with whatever you might want. For me, if I do anything, it's going to be to bring me more into the middle of that spectrum. You know, I have a lot of voice dysphoria, which I just learned that that's a term tonight, you know, so there's a lot more for me to learn about myself, and settings like this are fantastic. So thanks for the question. But yeah, don't ask anything that you would sign a HIPAA waiver for in the US is probably a good way to go about it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I completely agree with everyone else's points. So I'm not going to hit on those again. But you know what I do want to bring up is we talked a lot about the things that are not okay to ask, and a little bit on what is okay to ask. You know, one thing that I do want to point out, especially from like an SCA context around fighters, you know, we have equipment that we need to wear depending on what body parts we have. And often there's like this idea of, oh, this is going to be really awkward, you know, all these other things. Again, here's another like cheater tip on words to use. Are you wearing your personal protective equipment? And they say yes or no, and they should know based on, you know, rules of the list, what they are allowed or supposed to wear. And so that's a really easy one to do. And I do also want to point out all these questions that like we're saying you shouldn't ask of us, you also shouldn't ask about us to other people. Like, don't do that. Don't ask, oh, what was their dead name? You know, have they had surgery? Don't, if you shouldn't ask it toward us, don't ask it toward somebody else. So that's where I want to end with that part.
That was a lot of great information. Thank you so much for sharing. So how do you navigate cisgender Skadians making a to-do of courtly manners that are gender-based?
I am the first one on the list to answer this. This came up quite a lot as having been princess, having been queen. These things were things that absolutely came up. Courtly manners, I know it depends on the kingdom. In some kingdoms, there is this idea of, if there's a single female person who doesn't have an escort, someone will jump up and give them an escort. Things like that. Those things, it depends on what kingdom you're in, really are very binary. They're very, it's hard to get around them. I was always worried that I would get called up and someone would jump up and try and give me an escort, even though that is not what I wanted for myself. So really, as a cis person, thinking about those things that you're doing that are toward traditional gender roles, even if you think you know somebody's gender, it's really important to speak with that person ahead of time. If you're going up by yourself, can I jump up? Can I come talk to you? Or can I lead you up into court? And then around, some of the other courtly manners, one of the ones that came up was hand kissing. So that, ends up being an issue. Like I felt extremely uncomfortable when people would do that to me when I was queen, when I was princess, because it was a thing that only happened to me and did not happen to the king. And so that became very much on my side of, if someone tried to do that, I would pull back and, I would say, I would rather not, or, if someone tried to do it, I would correct them afterwards. Like, please don't do that for me. I don't feel comfortable with that. It's that whole idea around consent. Like there's this idea of, this is someone else's body. This is someone else's, space. Doesn't matter if they're transgender or not, being able to get past those things. Like, and one of the things I've seen is, a lot of people are like, but I have to do these courtly manners, otherwise it is not SCA. Find other courtly manners, or ask ahead of time. Get that consent ahead of time if you really want to do these things, but also let people have what they want in how they are being, presented, how they are being interacted with, and all of that. And I know some kingdoms, as it was kind of brought up, some kingdoms, regardless of your gender, you'll get an escort, which is also another way to kind of get around that. It's a way to, this is just kind of what happens. And I know, I'm pretty sure there's also ways to no, thank you, I'd rather not. So that is, let's see, courtly manners, And I have kind of more, I'm going to speak on a different question, but really around, deference that changes between if someone is, presenting as male and presenting as female. If they're at the same level and you're treating them differently, those are things really to start thinking about. What are you doing that's different between a king and a queen? What are you doing that's different between a lord and a lady or a noble? All of those things. So.
Well, I come from a kingdom that does a lot more of that and has a lot more fiercely individual behavior on a lot of fronts. Antier's founding was a significant dollop of Norse guy, and Celt McKelt. Those of us who were any other persona for a very long time were way in the minority. So because of that, we have a lot of individuality about how people approach and do those sorts of things. But one of the ways that I handle those sorts of things is I kind of go all Florid and Bardic on him. That I assure you, I can bring off enough of a bow to have given you all the flourishes possibly imaginable. And there wasn't a shred of curtsy to that. And you can almost always get out of stuff just by laying it on with a trowel. And so that's a fun way to kind of take over the narrative yourself. So if you are in a place that only escorts femme appearing people, you know what? The mask appearing people may not know when to bow as they go up in court either. It is a guide. It is an association. And frankly, as some of us get a little bit creaky in our knees, it is an assistance for getting down and back up again, or occasionally a reminder that we don't have to get down and back up from that kneeling pillow. So we do it for pretty much everybody. And that's because it has a job. If a mask appearing person is horribly loaded down and you can't manage to offer to assist him in a way that is not insulting him, then probably you should not be offering to assist her, because you clearly don't have the skills to do that without insulting them. I'm going to guess you think you do. So assist, offer, be that gentle being. And when you get these offers back, play it up however you want it to end.
I love it. Okay. How do you deal with offensive rhetoric when it comes up, especially in regards to positions of power?
This actually happened to me recently, actually. Personally, what I have done in my mundane life dealing with these sorts of people is it's honestly not the best, but this is what I do because it's what I have the capacity to do. I say what I need to say, I leave, and then I get my friends to go and deal with that. And by that, I mean, so what happened is, doesn't matter, it's work. In a work situation, I had someone who, the original question had the word TERF, which is trans exclusionary radical feminist. It is a sect in feminism which believes that trans people should not exist, that trans women are men who are trying to sexually assault all women by going into their spaces, and that trans men are confused and or disabled. She who will not be named makes this strange presumption that trans men are just autistic girls. It's really, really wrong. Anyways, and genderqueer and non-binary people don't exist. This is the rhetoric of the TERFs, and they also often try to find your personal address and send you death threats. This is a thing that happens to people. And so how I respond to it is send other people to go deal with it. This is why it's good to have a good number of good supportive allies. People who are willing to go to bat for you when it is hard. Because I don't have enough energy to deal with all that nonsense. I'm going to send someone else to deal with it for me, because I could do it, but it'll tax all my resources for the day, and I've got better things to do than to deal with someone whose opinion I'm not going to change. So.
I am nodding along and feeling that in my bones. I cannot say enough about how important it is for the word ally to be understood as being like a verb, not just a noun. And the cats are hissing in the background. That was timely. both in SCA and in our mundane context, only by virtue of knowing that I had a safe set of people with whom I was traveling or working, or in my higher, reporting structure, have I chosen to be out like at all. And I pass hard for, we think it's a girl, but I'm also in high tech. So a lot of times I'm just text, or in an emoji. So it's pretty easy for me. I'm pretty privileged in that regard. The few times that I have had an occasion where it may not have been intended by the other person, but I'll have a strong reaction to something that they've said, I now have the means to kind of time out. I give myself permission to be candid and say, I can't talk about that right now, and excuse myself from the scenario. I also have the good fortune of having, lots of resources that I can point people to who might be asking questions that I'm like uncomfortable asking, or hey, not right now, but here's a link. And the four-letter word of TERF, fortunately, doesn't show up for me very often in work or in mundane space, but it is absolutely one where I, in turn, would be an ally for whomever was at the affect of someone using that term. Like, that would be a different day, different outcome than they perhaps expected. And that's really what I find goes on, is it's very useful to have someone, should someone roll up on me and say something inappropriate, having someone who is not me, number one, and number two, perhaps a person whose body or presentation is different from mine, be it in skin tone, whatever, femininity, mask, femme, whatever, that the person saying those things would be more likely to listen to. And in hierarchical structures like the SCA, and particularly being an Atlantean, I'm very savvy on the whole missing stare concept and how things can be allowed to proceed when folks have, letters after their name, both in a mundane and SCA context. I think it's very important for the people who are, in those lauded positions, as our royals, or official legal positions, be they seneschalate or board of directors, to be very aware of those kind of things being potential outcomes, and offer us very clear recourse both in the moment and more broadly. So in my mundane life, for example, I have a global director of LGBT+ to contact. I have my immediate peers. I have a colleague on my team who is an out lesbian. So I've got like 3 people I can call to come and smash the bug. The folks on the call here, we need your allyship, and you can always ask us if we need a hand in a situation that's making you uncomfortable. It's very likely making us uncomfortable as well.
That's perfect. And I would just like to build off of that, because that it's very, very much the truth. If you're feeling uncomfortable with it, and you're not a trans person, and it seems like it might make a trans person uncomfortable, or anyone of any group that deals with these things, it's really important to reach out and see what the actual issue is, and see if you can do something about it. Within the SCA, we have, even for people at the highest level, we have ways to report offensive rhetoric. Some of these things, and I know that this might get covered later, but around the bullying policy and things like that, some of this does actually fit underneath that. Keep good records. Don't be offensive, and don't be bullying back, but always keep records. Follow the chain of command if you can. If for some reason the person who has offensive rhetoric is like your local seneschal or something, go the next rung up the step, and so on. So going to your regional seneschal, going to your kingdom seneschal, etc. Again, keep good notes. Try to make reports in ways that are safe. And if you can't, again, find an ally who can help with these things. And honestly, the more respected you are within the SCA community, which I feel like we should all be able to be respected. But if you're more well-known, if people seem to listen to you, it's especially important that you speak out. I know that some of the things that we have done, to help show that we are not okay with this offensive rhetoric is, emailing the board of directors. This shows up on a mailing list. People are able to, copy and say, I agree with these things. And it really shows the good paper trail to show the rest of us, these things aren't okay. We aren't okay with someone in this position of power saying these things or doing these things because it is unsafe for us. And because it isn't what the SCA stands for. And so, yeah, always find someone, don't just defer. There didn't used to be as many safety nets. There didn't, and we are still improving, and we still need to change. There's still changes in policy to make all of us safer that need to occur, but I'm not going to go into like the details on those. But yeah, absolutely, we need to take action. We need to follow things, and things have gotten better. If you were scared to report something 10 years ago, your kingdom may have improved. Reporting may have improved, and if it hasn't, the higher level SCA has, and we want to be able to help everybody.
I just wanted to jump in and add my 2 cents. They were talking about allies and how important they are. I feel like it's really important for allies to correct pronouns or gender when you know they're being misgendered. I've had several instances, especially out on the fighting field, where I'm with somebody who knows my gender, who knows my pronouns, and somebody else will come up and they'll say, "Oh, so nice to see another female fighter on the field," and I'm like, and then they stay quiet and don't say anything. And it's like, please say something, please say something. I'm scared to say something myself, but I want them to know, I want them to be corrected. And so, if you're an ally and you can stand up for a trans person, I guarantee you they're going to love you for it.
Thank you all for your responses. So one question that we got, and Yseult touched on this a little bit, is who do I report to if something happens to me? And what level of misconduct qualifies as a reportable offense? And who should you report to is almost always the seneschalate. Starting local for local issues and progressively escalating to kingdom and even society if you need to. And there's information on what a reportable offense is in our handbook, but the short version is that violation of our core values generally constitutes some level of potential reportable offense. For more information, I recommend that you reach out to the SCA DEI officer, Zahra at equity@sca.org, and she can help steer you to the correct officer. So wherever you're comfortable, and depending on what happens, your seneschal is going to be who you reach out to. And if it's not your canton seneschal or your baronial seneschal, go where you're comfortable, but it's the seneschalate. And if you ever have any questions, then you can always email equity@sca.org if you have questions about that, or you can email your seneschal, whatever level you feel comfortable at, and talk to them about what happened and what's going on, and they'll help you. Okay. And we also had a question submitted about the creation of policy. And whenever you have questions about policy, you want to go to the officer who's most relevant. So if it's fighting, you want to go to the society marshal. Issues for DEI, you want to go to your DEI officer, etc. And that person can steer you in the right space. And if it's not them, those emails for who it is can be found on the SCA website. And I hope that helps answer your question. If it didn't, please comment on this video and let me know, and I will help answer your question or find someone who can. So moving on, I asked the panel if they would share some personal stories with us. And I'd like to ask, how has being a member of the trans community in the SCA impacted you personally? Can you share a story or perhaps something you think about before or during events that someone outside of the community, the trans spectrum, might not realize is part of the SCA experience as a member of the trans community?
Okay, so I was questioning my gender when I first joined the SCA. So I had this very interesting process of I actually came out in the SCA before I came out anyplace else in real life. And so I've always been, Lord Skallagrim or my Lord Skallagrim. And I think one of the interesting stories that I have is there was this older knight who 60s, 70s, he's old, and he assumed that I was a guy when he first met me. And so, he addressed me as such and treated me as such. And then I added him on my Facebook, and I am loud and out and post all sorts of trans stuff all over my Facebook. And immediately after I added him, I was like, should I do this? Because typically when we think of people who are transphobic, we often think of the older people. And I was like, you know what, screw it. He doesn't like me anymore. Whatever. Well, he turned out to be one of my biggest supporters. And honestly, he was, he said to me once, he's like, hey, I'm kind of new to this stuff, so if I misgender you, I'm sorry. But he never has. He's never used the wrong pronouns. He's never, done wrong courtly manners towards me or anything. And so that honestly is one of the things that made me feel so at home in the SCA was, I've had supporters and even people who I looked at and I judged prematurely as maybe not supporting me have come out and supported me and been super awesome. So I'll leave it at that.
Hi, Puppy. So I came out as drag first before I knew I was trans, before I even knew what trans was. So my first event was on tier 12th night. Wore wig, did all the makeup because my roommate's really into cosplay and she does the SCA with me. I didn't really know, but I was kind of also in the mindset of I wanted to make me happier. So I kind of really went into this whole thing, kind of understanding the people around me, how supportive they've been, especially after my divorce and everything, that I felt like I had a good enough community to come out. That I am super excited that when I did come out, that night when I was going around vigil hopping with the blonde wig, had a bunch of photos being silly. This is when I first started my blog of transitioning and stuff. And just how much people gave me hugs and saw my smile and saw that I was finally genuinely happy and everything, that it was super exciting to know that I had this type of support. Then when I did find out about gender dysphoria and trans spectrum, my second event, I came out fully Maestra Rosa as a Master of Defense, and fought in the Queen's Rapier Champion as Maestra. And I got all the way to the finals and lost, but I had the spotlight. I had everyone congratulating me, and it was just amazing. The euphoria, the fact that I just started my journey and just had this great, and they've been great so far. Every time I have makeup questions, every time I ask, like, what do typically femme women like to use in their normal lives, or before I even went uh, knowing what persona I wanted and stuff. So on tier, I will say has I've been super lucky to come out in this kingdom here. But overall, even in the middle, I have friends when I grew up as a teenager out here, since I am second gen. I have people from all over the known world that have just been super supportive um, with my transitioning, and that's why I love the SCA and on how connected we can be.
So I don't have as many stories, folks, but my name here is actually a pretty interesting story, and just my whole persona is, I guess, of interest. So if you haven't noticed, I, the individual, use they and them pronouns, but I didn't write here that I allow Margaret to actually be understood and referred to by she and her pronouns. My reasoning for this is for safety reasons. Because I am functionally, to a lot of people, a trans woman, even despite being in Canada, I don't want to have to risk dealing with violence. So I will always let people, even in my mundane life, refer to me by she and her pronouns. I will never correct them, because if I correct, one, it takes energy and time that I don't care to use, and two, I don't want to have to deal with the potential risk of violence. And so my whole persona is to everyone female coded. But I have also done an explicitly trans persona, or trans as we would understand it today, but it's called something else back in the times. Margaret is someone who abandoned her family, ran away from home to become a courtesan, and chose this name based off of where she was located. Like a lot of immigrants, she chose a name that would blend in with the people around her versus the name that she was born with. And so there are the layers of being mixed race and also an immigrant and also being trans. And I'm still working on her dead names, because there's going to be 2 dead names. Yeah, this is all some of the work that I want to do. What I enjoy is coming up with all this story for my persona to make something that I actually believe in and being.
And I guess I'm next here, and really this question about, how has being a member of the SCA, trans community in the SCA impacted me, and it has been honestly in a big way. I came out actually while we were Prince and Princess. I had been debating about it for months and months prior to even us being in Crown. It's a thing that I had been thinking about actually for years, to be honest. And when we won, it brought to me this idea of I don't want to be queen and not be myself. And so it did actually spur me to come out earlier than I was intending to come out as non-binary, because we haven't had any trans royals so far until me, at least ones that are out. If you are not out, you were ahead of me and I apologize. But we hadn't had that. We hadn't had this representation, and I felt disingenuous to myself to not be who I was while I was on the throne. And since then, it has impacted a lot of people, across the known world who've reached out to me and really felt like they can do what they want within the SCA, and that they're comfortable in that, if we can have a trans queen, and I did go by queen, if we can have a trans queen, we can have someone who's trans in any kind of position of power. And as far as, though it wasn't easy, like even being queen, there were things that were placed on me as being expectations. That very feminine look was one of those expectations, which is one that I rebelled against heavily. One negative experience, though, along with that, while I was queen, was at a party at Penzic. I had my hair very similar to this, but it was up in a bun. It was purple, and so I had my shaved sides of my head and my purple bun. And the king was not wearing a head covering. He was wearing his crown. I was wearing my crown. Neither of us were wearing head coverings. And I had, a high ranking peer, come up to me and talk to me about, really like suggesting, like trying to be nice, suggesting, oh, I should cover up my hair. I'm the queen. I need to, present this way. And I really came back of, saying, but I'm non-binary. I don't want to or need to present as a feminine queen. And because I was so near the beginning of my SCA career, I actually ended up letting them, and I'm going to use this word, and if you're listening, I apologize, but it was true. I let them bully me into putting on a head covering. And it made me feel horrible for the rest of the evening. Like there's like little things like that can ruin a transgender person's view of themselves, or how they're presenting, or who they are. And so I just wanted to point that out. Like being trans in the SCA has impacted me a lot. I feel like there's a lot of weight on my shoulders, but I also love that the transgender community within the SCA is just so wonderful and vibrant. And it isn't on my shoulders, and I know it isn't. Because there's so many like wonderful people in this panel and outside of this panel. So that is my answer. Sorry, I went over a little.
I believe I'm next here. So the SCA helped me resolve which way I wanted to land on the gender spectrum, because I was so confusing in presentation from my biology that my regular line for 30 years was, if you figure it out, tell me. I don't know what I am. I'm in between, I'm intersex. And so I went with that. But Tvorimir Danilov was a guy. Tvorimir Danilov got he, him pronouns, got some clarity. I told people that I ought to at least have a simple reality in one of my games. So I played it all up, but the truth is that the SCA allowed me to discover exactly how much I valued being he, him, and how much I valued being able to let my beard grow out for a weekend. And actually thereby hangs the tale of how I even discovered that. It was the 30-year celebration. Yeah, we covered the fact that I'm old. And there was a water barrel out on those X's of wood like you see in old-timey movies and the whole. And one of the things you also see in some of those movies is, the guy is shaving at the water barrel, right? I had to. There was a water barrel. I had to do it just once. SCA's experiential archaeology, right? So there I am with my mirror propped up on the band around the barrel, shaving at the barrel, and people saw me. And I was so scared. And it was just fine. And my brain said, Wait, I didn't die. It was okay. I stopped shaving at events that day. I allowed my scruff to grow out, and it wasn't that much over a course of a weekend, but still, I was me, and I was he, him, and I got that, and I would correct people because there were these things out front. But the SCA allowed me to discover that I needed to give myself permission to remove the things out front and let free the thing inside.
Well, okay, well that's a difficult thing to follow, to be honest, because I'm trying to not cry right here. My story is going to be one that's definitely echoing elements of others' statements. So I first used they, them pronouns in the context of the SCA, and having been like a super femme, like encaustic mummy portrait level, like 1980s makeup that I used to wear anyway, persona, the 12th night event that we had in January pre-COVID was the first day that all day long I was hearing they, them pronouns. And it was also the first time I wore a period that wasn't like my focus period. So it was a cool thing of people didn't necessarily recognize me straight away. And I was wearing one of they, them medallions that a friend of ours in the kingdom was making for everyone to wear. And it was like awkward and amazing at the same time, right? And I was traveling with some very close friends, and the feedback I was hearing from them later about their watching me be super happy when I was being referred to by they, them pronouns was the thing that kind of underscored, well, like I want to do that elsewhere. And knowing for myself, again, being in IT, I often was the only femme presenting person in the room, if not the building, in my career, starting in like the late 80s, early 90s. And just, listening and learning from people who are in more marginalized demographics than myself, representation matters. And so that was kind of where I was like, well, this is terrifying, but if I'm not going to do it now, like, when am I, right? So that got me started to explore things available at my employer. And now I'm very actively engaged in a variety of diversity, equity, and inclusion things in that setting. And it's entirely Olivia's fault. I mean, really it is. So she's the one that gave me she, her pronoun pin the first day. And then I came back and asked for the they, them. And she's like, yeah, of course. And I was like, oh my God, now I get to choose. So now I'll need a he, him probably for my other persona. And these are good problems to have. And I used to grow my hair out like as long as I could, because then I could do the hair correctly in the SCA. And one of the first things I did post-COVID was find my clippers. Like, this is my hair. This is what I look like all the time. So now anyone out there who knows a persona that has hair like this, we need to talk. But the hair covering and other things that are expected based on our rank or role or whatever, I'm still unpacking that for myself. And I'm really grateful for those who have gone before me and have kicked some of those things in. And given how close friends my tweezers and I are, perhaps, I'll be learning something from Mir as well. I'm just saying. I know, right? So, yeah, the SCA is actually the entire reason I'm out at all anywhere, is the safety of our community.
Thank you all for taking the time to share the stories with us. So moving forward, what are some challenges that you see trans youth encountering, and how can we be supportive as a community?
Oh boy. I'm a substitute teacher in real life, and I'm working on becoming a teacher once COVID blows over. So I've had the opportunity to interact with trans students, and I think one of the biggest kindnesses that we could do in the SCA is give them the opportunity and the space to explore their gender if they want to. If they want to, dress as a guy for a day and see how it is and be referred to as he, him, let them, don't, let them switch their personas up. It doesn't have to always, be the same. And I think, the trans community as a whole, the more of us adults who are out there and who are open about, who we are. I know not everybody wants to be, and some people want to be styles, and we should respect that if they don't want to be outed. But if you know trans adults and they go, yeah, bring me, like me, bring me the kids who are questioning, the kids who want to know stuff. I will help. I will tell them my experiences. That's part of what this panel is too, is for people down the line who are questioning and who might be trans and coming into the SCA and not sure how to handle that. And I think I'll leave that at that.
So I am also a teacher. I teach in high school. And what Skallagrim said is exactly it. And with our trans youth and our questioning youth, the stakes are much, much higher. I cannot say strongly enough. Support whatever that kid says that they are. Support whoever that kid says they are. Our children are precious. Honor them and realize that they're trying stuff on for size. But you totally go with whatever they're trying on for size that day, even though you know they're going to change it in an hour. Go with it. Affirm them, because affirming whatever they say they are at that moment is affirming them and their exploration. And you will not only keep their hearts from breaking, you may keep their very lives from breaking. I can't say enough how critical it is to support these teens as they struggle with these things. It may take them decades to figure out what fits for them. Be with them for those decades if you need to.
So, continuing on, as I stated in our introduction, I am second gen. So I kind of, watching kids grow up in the SCA is kind of like a special place for my heart, even though I don't have kids myself. But let's see, I went through so many different names and personas and stuff because I was a kid. As Mir said, we change our minds all the time. We actually have a kid in Ontier that loves wearing dresses. I'm not going to say what relations they have to anyone, just in case they don't want to be outed. But we support their decision. We don't, and in Ontier, being more in the liberal state as it is, has been a lot easier for us to accept things like this. For me, I had parents that let us do whatever we wanted to learn, from arts and crafts to fighting. That's why I've been sword fighting since I was 10 and started doing, and now I am the youth rapier marshal for Kingdom of Ontier, because letting kids be kids definitely helps them develop what they want to do, helps them stay around. I actually do panels on these type of things to what makes a kid stay around is treating them like an adult sometimes. Sometimes it's appropriate when they're a kid. But letting them explore the SCA, how they want to explore. It's a very more broad general term over just trans spectrum in general. but it's a big proponent that me and some other second gen, third gen people are trying to fight for. Is I want to see more retention of us second gen people staying around. And if we're just free to let the kids decide, like my parents telling me not to choose my name until I was dead set, and I didn't even register my first name till I was 20. But I had Arthur, Martin of Hawksworth, Martin Baxter, and now even again I changed my name. We do it all the time. So just letting a kid be a kid is also very helpful if they want to run around the event. If they do want to do more structured things, what they want to wear, they'll go probably through 20 personas or whatever mom and dad is willing to wear, but or make for them, I should say. But yeah, it's definitely from a kid's perspective. Let them be kids. They don't know what's going to happen by the time they're 18 or anything like that. So just the greatest support is just let them have fun.
I agree with everything that everyone has said. I just want to add another layer to it. Prior to starting my PhD, I was working at a queer and trans youth helpline for just around minimum wage. I made very little money, but anyways, the number of kids I've had to talk to and support dealing with unsupportive parents who are afraid for their lives, who are homeless or fear becoming homeless, or who are suicidal due to their parents is immense. And one of the things I never want to ever have to deal with again is finding out that one of the kids that I worked with is dead. So this is crucial. Having all of this is so important, because if we don't, it's people like me who have to navigate, who have to support these kids on how to work around their parents. And that's really not great for a lot of folks. I'm coming into the SCA as someone who has had all of my major transition needs already completed. I had my name change. I've had all of the physical changes I wanted. I am coming into the SCA as someone who is pretty stable in who I am. If you had seen me 10 years ago, or even like 8 years ago, I would have been a mess. And I was very fortunate to be surrounded by people who are willing to go who are willing to work with me. They were willing to talk with me about makeup when I was trying out different kinds of makeup. They humored me while my fashion sense was abysmal, and I just tried things on and figured out what I liked and what I didn't like. People who were patient, people who were supportive, people who were willing to treat me the way that I wanted to be treated. This is not the golden rule, this is the platinum rule, where people treat you the way you want to be treated. And that is one of the reasons why I'm able to be here today, is that I had so many people around me that were really, really supportive. But this is something that I was able to do because I had access to a lot of skills finding people. So I gathered people who I knew would be supportive, and I was able to survive very well. Not everyone has my skills at making lots of good friends who are there to support me. And this is what's really important for our children and the children around us, is getting them to survive and thrive and be whoever they want to be in the world, whatever that is.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your answers and your perspective on that. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize the fact that most of our pre-submitted questions were from people in the trans community looking for support and advice and help, and supporting our trans youth is really important, because when you're not supportive to your trans youth, you potentially lose them. And that's the big picture of it, is that it's a matter of, as someone else on the panel mentioned, survival rate. And that's what this is about. It's about saving lives, good allyship in the LGBTQIA community. But right now we're talking about the T, is the trans community. Supporting the trans community is about saving lives. And it's not just a good thing to do or a right thing to do. It's necessary because you're saving your kids' lives. And I wanted to take a moment to say that, because that was really important. So what are good ways to support trans people and be a good ally in the SCA, both to individuals and the trans community as a whole? What's a good way to let people know that you're an ally and a safe space? How do we do that? How do we save lives?
I think a lot of these have already come up. As I said before, correcting people on pronouns is a big one, especially for me. I'm on the autism spectrum, and just in general, just being trans and having to correct somebody is scary. I mean, as far as in general, a good thing is to try and use inclusive language, like instead of just lords and ladies, maybe good gentles all, or lords, ladies, and good gentles, something like that. You know, asking people their preferred pronouns. One great thing that's kind of aimed at the officers is, if you write emails, put your pronouns at the bottom, and that makes it a norm. And so then somebody who's in the trans community can just put their pronouns and not have to think, am I being weird about that? You know, no, just say them. Yeah.
I have opinions about this as well. When I have the energy and I experience someone, you know, having what would be called a intellectual conversation about, you know, pronoun usage and things like that, I have spent some energy trying to educate them, but I don't always have the energy or the willingness or the time if I'm, you know, heading to something else. So one of the things that allies can really do for me is the pronoun correction, big time. And particularly in the SCA context, if we're able to remember everyone's mundane names so that we can find them on Facebook, and their titles and, you know, full names in the SCA, I don't feel like I'm asking a whole lot for folks to remember my pronouns on top of that. So for me, if someone uses my correct pronouns, even if they slip and they're like, oh, sorry, you know, they, and keep going, that's awesome. Because for me, it feels like, you know, another like hug around my shoulders, kind of like, I belong here, you know, I've been seen, I've been heard, I'm valued. And for younger people, you know, be they teens or younger, that can be super important, you know, for whatever their pronouns might be, and kind of normalizing that behavior among the adults that they're around, is going to create some space for them to explore for themselves. So that's just my kind of thinking on that. And allies also can share, you know, resources like links, and there's all sorts of things out on Google. So the more self-taught someone might be, the easier it is for us to remind them when it's not this net new, what do you mean pronouns, or what do you mean, you know, trans woman, that kind of thing. That can be very, very helpful. So, you know, sharing this link with other people, sharing it on your wall if you're on Facebook, opening yourself as an ally to our community so that you can be like, hey, I learned this thing today. That can really help us out a lot as well.
We've talked a lot about the ways that we need support, and you can be supportive. And as we normalize these pronoun pins, I know they're not exactly period. As we normalize creating space, as we normalize kind of broadcasting that space. There's a lady in my kingdom who's a former Baroness of Dragon's Nest outside Portland, Oregon, who creates these household banners. And for me as a Native American, I even got some of my things on the bottom. But even doing that kind of a thing where we state our inclusion as individuals, there's not a line of Ontir on that. It's not an official thing. But you come into a household with that, and you know you're welcome. You talk to somebody who's got a pronoun pin on, you know you got an opening.
One of the things I really want to see is, okay, this one is very Bard specific. I want more explicitly queer and trans content in songs. As someone who has tried looking into various songs to perform, there is a lot that I don't feel inspired to perform. I want songs that have, how did I describe it? I ran a Pride Bardic Circle back in June, and I forgot how I described it. Well, co-ran it. Sorry, brain. And having stories about princesses saving another princess, or some gender fun times, or explicitly, or explicitly, so pirates who are not interested in your booty, just the booty of treasure. These are all things that I'd like to see more of. I wanted to see more songs that are more about us, because everything is literally designed for cis people and heterosexual people, and it's a little bit awkward because I really don't care about those songs. And yeah, I've only managed one filk. I'm only one person, and there are a bunch of other people around, but yeah, I want more queer content. This is feelings. This also helps with people staying alive.
Thank you. So let's go to one of the live questions. I think we covered everything else before we answer our one final takeaway from all of this. How would you change names on scrolls for those of us on the spectrum?
Yeah, so this is actually a thing that we absolutely took into account during our reign last year. It's not necessarily about the names part. I think someone's going to expand on that after this, but it's about making making scrolls be able to be gender neutral, especially things like AOA scrolls. I know in the past I've received an AOA scroll that they had to fill in my pronouns on the scroll, in addition to my name and the date and things like that. And I know not every kingdom does preprints, but I'm talking about preprints. So one of the things that we did and that we purposely did was we left out Lord, Lady, we left out pronouns. We didn't want to have to fill those things in. We just wanted to fill in the person's name, the date. And there's easy ways to do this. You know, if you're saying, if you want to say, oh, and all present lords and ladies hear the worth of whoever, all present nobles hear the worth of. You know, you don't know if someone's going to change, you know, what their pronouns are in the future. So just don't use them unless, like, you know, sometimes maybe for, you know, a knight, maybe they want there to be male pronouns in there. Really figure out what that person's preference is. And if you can't figure it out, make it neutral, because it is not hard. It's easy. You can use gentles, you can use nobles, you know, thus and thus we now offer gentle admittance into our order of the da 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 da. Very, very easy. My county scroll actually, you know, at my request, was made to be gender neutral. They use they, them pronouns because those are the pronouns I requested. And really the themes are also gender neutral. They've put me in more masculine attire. They've put me in more feminine attire. And, you know, in addition to those things, when we, and this is kind of going off the idea of scrolls, but when we would call someone up and give them a scroll, a lot of the times in kingdoms, you'll say, your newest lord, your newest lady. As the scroll was being read to them behind me, I would look at them and be like, do you want us to introduce you as lord, lady, noble, armiger? And they had the choice right then and there how they wanted to be addressed back to the court. And so I think those things are really important. It's important for royals to remember, just make it gender neutral. You don't have to add the pronouns. You might not know the person's pronouns. They might change. They might not be out yet. Let's support the person, you know, in the ways that we can.
So scroll texts are actually offered to the prince and princess as they're beginning to build stuff. They'll give us sort of a theme, and we start throwing together wording, and we start throwing together pictures, and we kind of try to give them a bunch of stuff. And whoever is that royal scribe is going to be working with the royals on what they want, which means that what they're being offered might spark conversations. The other thing to know, so you can probably tell from here that I'm part of the scribal community too, is that there are scribal deputies in many kingdoms that keep those second run scrolls, or those scrolls that came in too late, charters properly, those pre-made things from a particular reign. They keep a stash. They keep a stash for house fires and floods and that kind of thing. But that stash means that if you got your award of arms from this particular set, it's entirely possible that you can get a replacement award of arms from that particular set without needing to go arrange a custom one. But you can also request a replacement, even if there is not a stash. And you'll go on to what's usually referred to as the backlog deputies list, where that deputy is trying to get scrolls out assigned. It's going to be a lot faster if you talk to a scribe and kind of get them to take you on, because the backlog can be long. But go find one of those ally scribes, or I don't know, community scribes, and get your new charter that says you.
Thank you. So we've talked to our allies and we've talked some to the community, but if you could give words of advice or say one thing to people who are questioning their gender or are not yet out in the SCA, who are part of the trans spectrum, what would it be?
I think my advice would be question away. You know, I know it's scary. It took me until I was 27 to realize who I was, and it took me probably at least a year to be comfortable with saying it. You know, find people who you know are safe to come out to, and come out in baby steps. You know, my baby step was the SCA. I said, I'm going to join this hobby, and I'm going to be who I want to be, and darn them if they don't like it. You know, but a lot of people just come out, you know, just to their sister, just to their mom, who they know is safe. You know, and have them use those pronouns that you're thinking about, have them use the name you're thinking about, without having to go public with it right away. You know, and come out at your own speed. If it takes you till you're 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. If you don't feel comfortable coming out until you're, you know, 95, then fine, whatever, you know. Come out when you're ready, and we'll be here waiting for you.
Yeah, that's the big thing with the whole it being a spectrum. If you don't know, you don't know. I'm already kind of talking to an old friend of mine, daughter, who's like, she doesn't know what type of gender she relates to. So I'm like, you don't have to worry about it. Let's break the norm that we have to be binary. It's more fun that way when you get to do what you want, what makes you happy. So for me, it's the best advice is just support what they want to do. I know we're really trying to work on the whole bullying and everything. So I think we're getting a lot better at letting people dress the way they want to dress, how they want to act, swapping several different personas throughout the day, just because they thought my own provost loves doing the Century of the Year, and she'll just jump around from persona clothing to persona clothing because she finds it fun. And that's how I believe is the great thing about the SCA is that we have those options out there. Some of us do stay strictly persona, but with the trans spectrum, until you know or comfortable what you want to do, there's no pressure. We're very welcoming, even in our own community, of, oh, that's really cool that you learned how to do makeup, or how quickly is your voice going, because even I have horrible vocal dysphoria now. But it's just appreciating the small steps they do when they come out is great.
So in bardic fashion, I'm going to sing my response. I had the inspiration came to me from some Steven Universe song lyrics. So folks who watch the show will probably be very amused. Isn't this such a beautiful night? Whoa, we're underneath 1,000 shining stars. Isn't it nice to find yourself somewhere different? Whoa, why don't you let yourself just be whoever you are?
All right, get myself unmuted, and I have to follow that. That was amazing. Good job. So yeah, for some last minute advice, you know, on people who are questioning their gender, yeah, as you know, one other person said, question away. Like, people change their minds all the time, and you never know until you've been able to explore. And you know, one of the things, and this is not perfect, obviously, but you know, one of the things is if you are questioning your gender, maybe just continue questioning it. Maybe think about it, because it's on your mind for a reason. And it might lead to something, it might lead to nothing. and hopefully whatever it is, it'll just lead you to be happier. And the last thing that I really want to say is we're out there. There are lots of people out there to support you. There's lots of trans people out there. There's lots of allies. I promise we're out there. There's so many of us. I've met a ton of us and not even close to all of us. So you never know how many people are going to support you. Even if you come out to someone and they warn you, oh, you know, there's too many people in this kingdom who, you know, won't react well to that. Maybe just keep listening, keep looking out, and realize that maybe that person is wrong. Maybe that person doesn't know your kingdom, doesn't know that knights will show up in droves at your crown tournament wearing rainbow chains, which is a thing that happened during my reign. You never know who is an ally, and I promise they're there. And sometimes they will show their faces, and sometimes you'll cry so hard about it, and it'll be wonderful. So just stick around and be yourself.
So one of the things that we teach about in the society are the chivalrous ideals. And to have the courage to discover who you are, to have the largesse, the courtesy to give space to others, the prowess to make that real, the loyalty and faith to those around you, and to use your franchise to create space for other people sounds truly knightly work and incumbent upon all of us.
So my little postscript here is going to be, you know, I'm 49 years old and I'm just now figuring stuff out, and a lot of it has to do with those who are younger than I am, that, you know, myself and people like us have kind of accidentally held the door a little more open. And, you know, the way for me is being led by people who are younger, who are exploring language and sharing it as memes and, you know, stuff like Steven's Universe. No joke, that's amazing. And I need that as I continue to explore, you know, like a friend of mine refers to her gender journey as kind of like, well, you just push the boat off from the binary and just kind of float around and figure it out as you're going along. I'm like, cool, you know. The SCA is always going to be the place where I feel I'm going to be most likely to explore those things. Like, I am seriously considering doing full on like super mask persona, because that would be fun, you know, because now that I've decoupled myself from this binary, I can pick whatever the heck I want. And that is so empowering for me. And I take it out into the rest of my life. So I think that's one of the things that draws us here today, is both our love of the society and everything we can do here, but also the desire for, you know, let's take this out into the rest of the world. You know, let's bring that, you know, as Mir very aptly put it, it's being courageous, right? Like, it's not just a weekend thing for me. I'm this way 24/7, 365. And if you all could be an ally to me, you know, when I'm at the grocery store, that'd be great, you know? And maybe it's me, or maybe it's someone like me, but like, I'm really looking forward to seeing both the change in the society and then, you know, for our neighborhoods. So thank you very much for the setting. I really appreciate being a part of this.
Thank you. Thank you to each of the panelists for joining us, and all of the information that you gave and the questions that you answered. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. My heart goes out to each of you. I love you so much. I want to let everybody watching know that we're going to have some resources available after the panel that the panelists have put together, and some from the DEI office. Don't forget to like the DEI office, the official page on Facebook. because that's where you're going to get updates about other panels in the future. I'm going to take December off, but my next panel will be in January. I'm really excited about it, and keep an eye out for that. Thank you to the moderators who helped me today, Master Andreas and Zafra, and everybody who's helped make this happen. I really appreciate you. Atlantia, I love you. SCA, I love you, and I look forward to seeing everyone safely again soon. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good night, everybody.